Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our SIP customer webinar of the year. Today, we're looking all about the org processor, or maybe you might hear it as hierarchy functionality of EFS. So, if you are new to Questback and EFS or to our customer webinars, my name is Michael Coultier. I lead the customer webinars here at Questback UK. I'm a client success director, and I'm delighted to be joined by the legend, that is Jay Hartley.
Hi there, everyone. Yeah, it's Jay Hartley here. I'm an implementation consultant here at Questback and have worked on a number of VOC, VOE customers projects which involve using the org processor. So delighted to be here today.
Fantastic. So what we're looking to cover, we're going to start off with the theory. What is the org processor and why use it? And to be honest with you, it's not always relevant to use it. So when would you, when wouldn't you use it? And then really, like a look of our customer webinars, we're going to get dirty in EFS itself, looking at creating hierarchies, some of the structure variables behind it and the use of those, how you set up a self-selection question or what that means, and then finally look at the org processor module, sort of the external view of it and how you set up people to use that. Please do ask questions as we go along. We will stop and try and answer them, but we've also left time right at the end for any questions that come in that we don't manage to answer. So yeah, please do use the little chat and question answer functionality and go to webinar as we go along. Great, so without further ado, I'm going to kick things off looking at what is the org processor and why would you use it? Really, it's a hierarchy tool. You can see a fantastic hierarchy picture on the right that we use when we're running surveys. And what it allows is a really easy setup of corporate hierarchies. Often you have lots of different views of the corporate hierarchy, and then even more importantly, reporting at them at different levels. So you say, okay, what's everyone combined, or maybe just show me this team or these teams together and elements like that. So it's a modular thing, which means you can kind of access parts of it externally without having the whole EFS access, which is fantastic because you don't really want people going in looking at sort of the survey design and other elements of it, and also from a GDR point of view, but people look at the bits they do need to see, like who's in their team and the response rates. And the real reason you would use the org processor is for large-scale VOC and VOE projects. For something small-scale, you probably don't need it, but really it comes into its own when you're doing sort of the really large-scale projects. So I've got a quick checklist really of why would you use it, and the biggest one really is all about making running projects, making it a lot simpler. If you're having maybe just one or two levels of the hierarchy, then I wouldn't bother doing it. So maybe you're working with maybe logistics part of an organization and you have about 6 or 7 depots, you probably wouldn't bother. You just have a simple question that says, well, where do you work? But anything, once you get to a third level of the hierarchy, or maybe 20, 30 teams, that's when it really comes into its own and makes the whole job of managing who sits where a lot easier. And because we're using a hierarchy, you can basically update all the data points simultaneously. So if you're not doing it, and someone moves from maybe one area of the hierarchy to another, then you have to update every single data point lots of different ways. I'm going to show that in the next couple of slides what that actually means. And you can forget all about that by using the hierarchy tool. And if you're not using the hierarchy tool, it means that you have to kind of do lots of reaggregation of data, and the scope to bring in errors is huge as people kind of move from one team to another. So it really helps with keeping the data in a good way. It makes reporting times quicker. In fact, makes it simultaneously. So what's happened a lot over the last few years is that we've been talking about always on surveys and things like this in the VOC, VOE world. And what a lot of our customers expect now is almost having a dashboard whilst we're in fieldwork, so they can see that the early trends emerging. Yeah, and absolutely you can do that with the hierarchy tool and make it not only quicker, but make it simultaneous with going live. And a bit of a buzzword from a few years back, closed loop feedback, makes it a lot easier to put those things in place. You can say, right, this doesn't happen. It needs to escalate up the hierarchy to the next person, and so on. And sort of almost like a dirty word, response rates, but there's this huge clamour still whenever we run VOE programs, and VOC to a lesser extent, of people want to know how many people have responded. So you can basically set up on a hierarchical basis hundreds, if not thousands, of accesses to the response rate part of the tool, and people can log on whenever they want, and believe me, they do log on a lot, just to see how many people in their teams or parts of the hierarchy have responded. So here's a good hierarchy example. It's a made-up retailer that I created earlier, sort of looking at what would happen if you had to kind of move people around and why you might need a hierarchy tool. So very simple example here, got retailer overall. Second level, you'd have retail and then logistics, head office. And then retail, as often happens, it gets broken down into geographical basis. We just went for a simple north, central, south here. And then we just opened up the southeast and the southwest areas accordingly. And obviously you could open up Kent and Sussex and see what's inside them as well. This is just a quick snapshot of different parts of the hierarchy. And this is quite an easy one. It only breaks down into 6 levels. And in this theoretical situation, you've got one person who maybe needs to move from a Southend store maybe down to Minehead, or Chelmsford down to Minehead. It doesn't really matter. Just the principle is moving from one team in level 6 to another team in level 6. And what the employee file could look like is a little bit like this. And you can see that actually level 6 needs to change. And you think, well, that's easy enough. I just basically run a new report for Chelmsford, new report for Minehead. So you can see, okay, what the differences are. But then you start to think about it as, well, actually, that's going to affect the next level up as well. Essex and Somerset, I need to rerun those reports. Oh, actually, that's the next level up again. South East and South West need to be rerun. And you start to see straight away, and this is a very simple illustration of all the different teams that get affected by a single person's move, and all the different parts of the hierarchy that need to change accordingly. So when you start to extrapolate this into a lot bigger examples, maybe a restructure or lots of people moving all over the place, or new stores are opening up or closing, suddenly it becomes a complete nightmare. And imagine having to go through a data file and you're having to update this at every single level of the hierarchy for every single person, and then trying to keep all the numbers in check and all the data accurate becomes a nightmare. I've sort of been there over the years before I went to Questback, and it really is hard to keep tabs with everything. And as I've written there, large-scale restructures, that was kind of thing I wanted to run a mile for without the hierarchy tool. So that's kind of giving you the theory behind it, why you sort of need the hierarchy element to it, and sort of what the benefits are. So what I'm going to do now is move away from the theory, and Jay's going to talk a little bit more about sort of the practice.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so as you say, I'm going to start looking through some of the key features. And before we get into the detail of the system, I just wanted to kind of walk through kind of the steps that you would need to cover in order to do this. So first of all, and it's worth noting, some of you may not have this module enabled, you will need the employee module of EFS enabled, and that's the area of the tool that gives you access to the org processor. So once you've got access, you need to create an employee survey. You would then click on the org processor option, which will now appear on your survey menu. And the first step you would do is look to create an overall unit. And then once you've done that, you can add or import your full hierarchy into the tool. And then you can assign, using the meta name, any participant to that hierarchy. So just going to bring up the tool now. So when you're in the tool, one thing to note, is really important thing to note actually, within the org processor, you actually have access to multiple hierarchies as well, which is really something that's very useful when it comes to matrix organizations, organizations where you might have a standard hierarchy, which is kind of like business line, but then something that is driven off managers, which is separate to that. So make sure you kind of like touch in with us on that if you have any queries around how to use those multiple hierarchies. So now I'm going to go into the system, and the first thing you need to do is create an employee survey type. So if I just go to the projects menu, you click on the new project here, and you can see here that you've got an employee survey that you can create. And all the other steps would be the same, but then you just make sure you've got that selected, and then that will give you access to the relevant bits of the hierarchy. If I now go into a little dummy hierarchy project that I've created here, you can see quite quickly within the menu now you've got the org processor option. And you can see in here that we've already pre-filled some of the information. So you've got the retailer overall, and you've got the retail north, etc. If you want to go through and create a unit, you just click on this option here. Once you click on that, you get some options here to put in the name of the unit. So for example, if I type in in this retailer a new store that sits within one of the northern regions, click in here, and then the other option that I need to enter here is a meta name. One thing to note with the meta name is that you can't have any spaces in here. The only things you can put in here are alphanumeric characters plus the underscore and the hyphen. So I'm just going to put in a test unit. And then as you're working through here, you can see here that I've got an option called the parent unit. Now the parent unit is obviously where this unit is going to sit within the hierarchy. It defaults to either the overall unit if you're starting out with a brand new hierarchy, or the last hierarchy unit that you potentially have assigned as a parent. So if I click on this search option here, it brings up the whole hierarchy, and as I mentioned, this was something that I was going to sit under the North region, so I look for the North, or indeed I can search up the top here and select the option here. If I wanted to create another unit, so I'm adding another unit into my hierarchy here, I can click on this little option here and it will just take me through to a repeat of the same screen. If I now go back into my organisational structure, you'll see that Liverpool has been added underneath the North unit. Now, when you're working with a hierarchy, the chances are that you will be potentially dealing with an HR system or something like that. So the beauty of this tool is that you can actually import hierarchies from scratch, and you would do so by building your hierarchy in Excel. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to export this hierarchy into Excel so you can see what the format looks like. And I'm going to import a connected list, because again, if you're working with an HR system, the chances are that you will get a format that looks very similar to this. It's a parent-child hierarchy, which if I open up this Excel, you can see quite clearly. You have the details of each of the units and then where they sit within that hierarchy. So what is their parent meta name? So the meta name in this example is obviously just a set of test information. Again, if that's coming out of your HR system, the chances are that will be a cost center, or potentially if you're working with a manager hierarchy, it might be the manager's own personal ID or employee ID. If I go back to the org processor, again, against each of the units, you can see that there's a little cog, and then I've got the opportunity to import that structure. So all I need to do here is click on the import option, find my file, and then run that into the system. It's got a number of checks and balances in place on that system. So if I've made an error, for example, I haven't given a unit a parent, it will flag that up to me and I'll be able to correct that as I work through the tool. There are some other great little options that are available to you on this same cog. So if I click on Essex, for example, here, you can see that I can edit the unit. So for example, if my region was being changed and it was including Kent, for example, I could come in here and change that to say Essex and Kent, make the update, and the system would record that change instantly. In addition, if it was no longer sitting under the southeast and it was moving to a different part of the business, again, I could click on this little magnifying icon and then I could move it to a different part of the organization and then save the change, and any change that I made will be instantly replicated within the tool. Going back to the main hierarchy, again, if I open up logistics, for example, it might be that I want to add another depot under logistics. So if I click on the cog, create the subunit, and type in a new unit, again, putting in my test, and you can see here that it's identified already because I'm creating a subunit that the parent should be logistics. Click save, and again, if I scroll down in the hierarchy, I can see that Castleford has been added under the logistics tab. If I click back to my organisational structure, I'll be able to demonstrate a couple of the other actions that are available. So again, this is one of these is moving. So again, in this example, you can see here that my logistics structure is alphabetical order, but Castleford, the new one that I've added, is now out of sync. So if I want to move that up, just clicking that option there, moves it up in line, and again it just means that when we're using the self-allocation option, which we'll come to later, it just keeps everything neat and tidy. Equally, if I click on the icon again, the other option that we've got in here is to delete. So for example, say the Doncaster is closed, I can click on the delete option here and that will remove it from my view. Additionally, there is a separate option if I need to delete a handful of units and I don't want to do them all individually. I can select the checkbox here and choose the delete unit option here, and then if I click on execute, it will just ask me to confirm that that's what I want to do. It gives you a warning, so if you've already uploaded a load of participants, it kind of reminds you that they're going to be deleted too, but I'm happy to do so because I'm just building out my hierarchy at this point. Click on OK, and you can see here now under logistics I've just got the two options. If I now just go back into the hierarchy area, one thing that I want to show you as well is around assigning participants. So there are a number of ways you can assign participants to a hierarchy. Where possible, it's always best to preload that information. So when you're importing users into the system, the meta name will be a new field that you can include. It acts as just as simply another demographic. You can include that in your file and you can upload everybody to the hierarchy, and that will get reflected in the information that you see here on screen where you've got the number of online participants within your tool. However, if you've completed an upload and you need to add a couple more people in, then you go back to the survey menu, go to the participant administration, and if I'm creating my new user, I can type in an email here, and again we've got this little magnifying icon, which means that I can click on that, and in the same way as when we were looking at our parent view, I can either search for the unit if it's particularly big hierarchy, or I can click select if I see it there.
This is the kind of information when we're doing large-scale VOC projects that we kind of grab from the via an API from the till receipt information, so we know where the person store is they shopped at. And
then again, we'll come back to this in a little while, but if you don't know where that person sits, or you want to give the option of somebody choosing to self-select, there are some options available to do so, and we'll show you that in the demo later.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay, for bringing that to life. The next part we wanted to look at was around the structure variables and what on earth this means. It's going to be a brand new area for some of you on the webinar today. So the structure variables, really, it's very similar to participant variables. So when you think about participant variables, the kind of information you would upload might be things like gender, length of service, how many times they've shopped if it's a VOC, and elements like that. And it's just a piece of information that, in effect, you can report on. And it's exactly the same for the structure. So as well as the meta name and sort of the hierarchy information itself, you can add more and more information in, so you can actually start to report on that. So I'm going to show you now how we would go about doing that. So the first thing we do is go back to our org processor element. So there it is, org processor. And then when we go to configuration, we have something called structure variables on the left hand side, just there. So we're going to click on that. And we have a number of standard variables that come no matter what, and then we can add new ones in. So think of it all just as questions, really. That's the best way of thinking of it. That's how you would store question information. So you can have it as a text field, but of course with text field it's quite hard to report on it. That's not normally very a particularly useful thing to have when you've got dashboards or other reporting tools. So maybe have it more as a radio button. Just for this fictional retailer, I'm going to say is store type. So I'm going to click save, and then once you've got it, oh, I forgot to put it in twice. Sorry. Let's try one more time. Here we go. We've now got a new one called store type. So once I've done that, it says please put the answer categories in. So typical retailer, this might have supermarkets. It might have maybe local stores, And then in this day and age, of course, it has the dark stores, the internet-only stores as well. So there could be your 3 options. And then when we get to the org processor, we can make that information visible now by clicking on View. There we go. Tick it there and save settings. Then I can go into each individual store and say what kind of store it is. So here's Southend. Click on Edit Unit, and you can see now that's available. That's going to be a supermarket. Go down to the next element, which was Chelmsford. Make that a local. And then let's just pretend that Basden is internet only. Again, now don't worry, you wouldn't need to click through these one by one. As Jay showed you earlier, you can export the whole hierarchy, and then using 1, 2, or 3, you can upload all of these and overwrite the existing information in one big import and export process. So very quick and easy to do. And the real beauty of this now is that information is available when it comes to reporting time. So what you can easily do is you can click on retail overall or south overall and say, right, just show me my internet only stores, just show me my locals, just show me my supermarkets. Other information I might want to put in is sort of average NPS rating and elements like that, and have a whole range of criteria which really brings the data to life in a way you wouldn't be able to otherwise. So a really handy feature there.
So now we return to that self-allocation or self-selection option that's available. So this is something that, again, is available to you. As I said before, if possible, certainly within a VOE environment, if you can preload and upload that information into the hierarchy, that is the best way of ensuring that the data that you report on is accurate. However, we recognise this is not always possible. So for VOE projects, the HR data just might not be reliable, or it might be that you have an area of your business where the population is particularly fluid, so you might know who they are, but you might not know who or where to assign them to. Additionally, if you're a VOC or panel customer, the chances are that you'll want to track where those customers have bought something from, and it may not be something that you have in your CRM system. So that might be something, again, that you might want to ask somebody where they made a last purchase from and be able to track those responses against the stores. So if I now just click through, I think one of the things which we've noticed is where it's not possible, EFS has got a couple of great little options available to you that will allow that participant to self-allocate. The other thing to note is it's also possible to enable self-allocation alongside preloaded. So, for example, if you have a part of the business where you are pretty confident in your HR data, you can upload that and then have a second option within the system that allows those areas that are slightly more fluid to self-allocate. And again, it's just a simple recode needed to kind of filter that question so that only the right population see it. If I go into the tool now, and now this time I'm going to go into the survey menu and into the questionnaire editor. I'll click into my self-allocation page and just show you that the new question that we're talking about today come under the advanced options, and you've got these two here. You've got the hierarchy search and then the self-allocation, which is a tree view. So first of these I'm going to look at is the self-allocation question. So once you've created the question, there's a couple of things that you'll need to do. The first of which is choose the structure view. Now, as I mentioned before, you can have more than one structure within the org processor. So you just need to define here which is the structure you want people to pick from. So again, if I had a multiple option in here, I would be able to choose from the options available. And then additionally, there's a second option here, which again, we'd always recommend you do choose this. This is called the self-allocation field, and what that will do is it will actually allocate the option selected into the system so that when you're looking at response counts and things like that, the user's response is recorded against them. Now, if we actually take a look at this question in action, you can see here it loads up and I get a little drop down where I can work through the hierarchy, and if I know that I sit within retail, I sit within the north, I can work through and I can select my unit. Similarly, if I actually work within the south, I'd work through and then I choose the south end store, that would be selected, I'd move through, and then that would be the one that gets recorded into the system. Now you'll note as I've worked through there are a few of these areas that are greyed out. So for example, you've got the retailer, overall retail. So these are areas of the system where I don't particularly want people to select against. I actually want them to work down through and choose the lowest node within that branch of the hierarchy. And then under head office, I've got a slightly different view where I've actually got an area of the business that I don't want people to select. So again, this is something that you might require. For example, we've got our main board. So again, that might be a group of people that we know are going to be part of the main board, and we don't want other people being able to choose that option. So we're kind of preventing them from doing so. I'll show you how you do this within the org hierarchy now. So if I go to the org processor, and then if I click into the unit itself, you can see here that there are some advanced options, and this is where we would choose to switch on or off the option. So if in that second example, such as the main board, I didn't want people to be able to allocate themselves to it, I've deselected that option, but we'd also recommend hiding that unit as well, so that when people are working through the survey, they don't see it as an option. So if I were to click that now and return to that question, in the survey, and preview it again, go down to head office, I now don't see that option. The other areas, as I said, where you've got kind of subunits, and those you still want them to display, but you just want them not to be selectable, so somebody couldn't choose that area and move through. The second question type that we've got in here is a self-allocation search. So again, this originally was set up to work with anonymous surveys. So what you would do here is you would create if you were working with an anonymized or personalized survey, you'd create a employee survey type, build your hierarchy within there, and then within this question in the anonymous survey, you would choose the source survey that's got your hierarchy in, and then again the structure view. And then if I look at this question, it's slightly different in that it's actually a search option that comes up. So this works pretty well where you've got something very easy for the end user to identify. So for example, if it's a store name or a store number, this is where it works quite well. You start typing in the information and the search brings back any matching options. Similarly, the advanced features that we just looked at, the permit allocation and the hide unit work in exactly the same way here. So if there are units that I don't want to show within here, if I've deselected those options in the org processor or selected the hide unit option, that won't appear in this list. So it keeps it nice and tidy and ensures that users can kind of select the right information without allocating themselves in places you don't want them to. So I think the only difference here to note is because this was built with an anonymous survey in mind, it captures the information that you select here as survey information. It doesn't allocate it directly to the hierarchy. However, with a very simple read code, you can do that yourself, and then that would then also appear within the response counts.
Fantastic, almost finished today now, just one small area left to show you. So this is all about the org processor module. So as I mentioned right at the beginning of the webinar, you have the ability to give access to typically other people in the organization, the ability to just go log on and see the hierarchy and make changes to it. So it's quite a nice tool that it changes as per the stage of the project. So during the setup stage, they see the hierarchy, you can add units, then when you're live, you see response rates, and then after the survey, it can turn into reporting and distribution. And I've actually got an example to show you today where actually I've hacked it, and you have different phases going at the same time, which sometimes is relevant for ongoing projects too. So I'm just going to go back to our survey menu, go back to our org processor. And the first thing I wanted to show you is sort of where the org processor interface is sort of hidden. And there it is, it's a little bit hidden away, and that's the URL of it. So if people wanted to access it for this particular project, that's the link you would provide to people. And then they log on with their email address and a password which you set up for them. Now the good news is that we can actually cheat and we can actually log in as people. So we go back to the org processor itself and you click on org processor users, and this is where you set people up. So I'm just going to add in a completely fictional person. So let's add a user in. And say this person maybe just looks after the southeast or the south. So it's a two-stage process basically. You have to add the person in, and of course there is an import feature. You can do hundreds if not thousands at the same time. And then you can say which organisational units to have access to. And it's absolutely fine to have multiple roles. So sometimes say an HRBP looks after 2 areas of the business, you can add them in twice in effect. So there's south. Let's add that person in and let's make them the owner. Click execute. And then when I go back to edit user, you can see there we've got these two little options, and I want to log in the org processor as that person. And it gives you a little gump here which you can update or never show again depending on your what you want best. And then you see they only see the south because that's what they have access to. But what they can do is then they can merge units, create units. Let's just say they need to put a new unit in. They can do it themselves because they knew new stores opened up. New Leon C store. And they know it's a local store. And they can click save. So there's a good example. Or it could be that they're in Essex and Kent. And maybe there's, I forgot to save them, sorry. You could say, oh, there's been a fire at Chelmsford store. We need to remove it temporarily. And they could hide it themselves. Again, click save. So all those things are possible. So it's very similar to what you're seeing within the main EFS admin area, but a simplified, nicer looking interface really. And you can see there's a second area at the top here, return. And this is the response counts, response rates. And you can see that it gives you all the breakdown. It's only a fictional survey, so there's not much going on there. But then you've got the ability to export the data out. Clicking on export there. A couple of different options available to you depending on how you set things up. And if you want to, they can also set up new users themselves. So they can actually then add a user in for Southend, Chelmsford and Basildon. It could be they're getting annoyed for the response rate requests from those stores. They like, rather than me emailing around, you log on yourselves and have a look. So they can keep adding things in. And it's a great rights and access all the way behind this, which lets you kind of add people in or stop people adding in accordingly, depending on how you want to set things up. So that's probably it for everything today. We've had a few questions come in as we go along. The very first one, I think it's probably better for you, Jay, actually. It says, what if someone only knows about where some of their people work? So I mean, we see this a lot in VOE projects where they say, well, I know where everyone is in the head office, but out in the field they've got email addresses, but they've got no idea really where they are.
Absolutely. So the nice thing there is, I think we touched on this during the presentation, you can indeed have a dual process set up whereby you import all the users against the survey that you know sit in the head office part of the business, and then for the other half you can set up the survey with a simple routing rule in place, such as whether somebody has got the meta name assigned to them, and then make sure that the hierarchy question only appears to that area of the business where you know who they are, just not where they sit.
Fantastic. And someone else asked similar questions about, can you have a mix of unique links and open link as well? And I've done this myself many times. It does take a little bit of technical work in the background from Questback, but I remember working with one organisation, and they originally had an open link, and they had about 16 different CEOs because everyone was trying to be a little bit funny and say they ran the company. So what we did, we changed it. So the top two levels of hierarchy, in effect, got a unique link, we said where they worked, and everyone else in the organisation had access to the open link. And that is completely possible, but says just reach out via the help desk and we can help set that up. It just takes a little bit of tinkering in the background, but not too much hard work. Fantastic. Well, that's everything today. We've overrun ever so slightly, so I hope we haven't kept you waiting too much. The next one in mid-July will be on our EFS summer release. Very apt for the sunshine here today. So I think it's going to be on roughly on the 18th of July, but you'll see an email coming very soon about when that precisely will be, and look at all the new features and advantages of the EFS summer release. But until then, thanks so much, and have a great rest of the day.